Ireland initially, then into western Scotland during Saturday morning, and also rain then creeping into western parts of England and Wales before Saturday lunchtime. The easternmost parts of England stay largely dry through Saturday, but it will cloud over and it will feel cold here after that frosty start. Slowly but surely, as the rain arrives elsewhere, it'll start to turn milder. A milder day for all on Sunday, but a predominantly cloudy day with some rain and the winds picking up once more, particularly so on Sunday night.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the afternoon agenda on GB News with me, Alex Phillips. Now, this show is all about your opinion and mine. So it's not news as you know it. We debate and we discuss the big things that really need to be on your agenda. So with that in mind, here's what we'll be covering today. COVID Plan B is in the pipeline, but how worried should we really be about Omicron? We'll crunch the numbers for you. Labour's deputy leader calls for Boris Johnson to resign over the Downing Street Christmas party. How damaging is the latest scandal to hit the Prime Minister? And given that this is just the latest in a long line of missteps, we need to talk about hypocrisy. Are we experiencing a pandemic of political lies? That's the agenda for the next hour. What's on yours? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. But first, it's time for the news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Tamsin Roberts. Here are the top stories at 4 o'clock. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. During urgent questions in the House of Commons, Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis said they are looking into several claims. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about an alleged Downing Street party forced a resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. Here's what Paymaster General had to say in the Commons earlier.
Now, I can confirm to the House that the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will establish the facts surrounding the following. Allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 27th of November 2020, a gathering at the Department for Education on the 10th of December 2020, and allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December 2020.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, whilst guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row. Conservative MP Andrew Rossendale has told GB News he'll vote against the measures.
I understand why, when the pandemic hit to begin with, none of us knew what we were facing, and the government was right to take action. Since then, I think that it has been a huge overreaction and we're not calculating the effects of lockdowns. So why, at this very point, when we're looking forward to Christmas, when businesses are really at their peak in terms of what they need to do for Christmas, to then restrict things, I don't really understand why we're doing it.
Meanwhile, Dominic Raab and Grant Shapps are self-isolating after being in contact with the Australian Deputy Prime Minister, who has since tested positive for coronavirus. Barnaby Joyce confirmed the news while travelling in Washington, D.C. The ministers had both met Mr Joyce when he was in London earlier in the week. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross is also self-isolating after a member of his staff tested positive for COVID. Police have disrupted 7 late-stage terror attacks in the UK since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Counter-terrorism policing say the latest figures take the total number of foiled terrorism plots in the last 4 years to 32. They're also calling on people to remain vigilant over the festive period. Boris Johnson is facing renewed questions into a donation used to pay for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat. It comes after the Conservative Party was fined almost £18,000 by the Electoral Commission. It says the Tories failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. A party spokesperson said they were considering an appeal. The Scottish Finance Secretary has confirmed income tax rates will stay the same next year. Kate Forbes announced the freeze during the budget at Holyrood this afternoon. Other measures include the continuation of business rates relief of 50% for retail, hospitality and leisure services for the first 3 months of the next financial year. Meanwhile, small businesses will pay nothing. It's the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. The UK is experiencing its largest ever outbreak of bird flu. Around 500,000 birds have been culled so far, with 40 infected premises across the UK. But the risk to human health remains very low, according to public health advice, and there's a low risk to food safety. The chimney at Scotland's last remaining coal-fired power station has been demolished. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon pushed the button to ignite 700 kilos of explosives to bring down the chimney, which has stood at Longanet in Fife for over 50 years. Scotland has been coal-free since Scottish Power closed the station in 2016, and the energy company now generates 100% green electricity through its wind and solar farms. Those are the headlines. Now it's back to Alex and the afternoon agenda.
What on earth is going on? Did we really just have a week of the Prime Minister repeatedly reasserting to the nation that no COVID rules were broken at the fictional number 10 Crimbo Bash, to then see his aide resign over a party that didn't happen, and to have an inquiry announced to Parliament into parties that categorically did not happen? Is someone in the Downing Street Command Centre smoking crack? Well, possibly, considering the Prime Minister has now rushed through a law out of nowhere to snatch passports off people bashing back narcotics. You can, at this point, probably assume that if it's banned, someone in government is doing it, and a law's been thrown together as a smokescreen to convince us all that they aren't. The spin machine is an endless source of wonder to me. From summoning the nation's media to the garden to assure us that Dominic Cummings categorically did not break COVID rules when testing his eyes by staring at a castle, to the oven-ready Brexit deal that categorically would not put a border in the Irish Sea while we're all still trying to sort out that border in the Irish Sea, to gazillion quid wallpaper that categorically did not break donor rules, but, well, actually it did, and hollybobs to Mustique and Marbella that categorically did not bend the rules, just kind of twisted them, to the fling with the American tech entrepreneur that definitely didn't get flung, but involved a whole lot of flinging, to the MP who categorically did not break lobbying rules as it was the investigator that needed investigating, but then who later resigned for breaking rules, and another inquiry launched into everyone else breaking rules, to the promise that there would never be vaccine mandates to welcome to dystopia 2022. Boris either hasn't got a clue what's going on or is a compulsive liar. Neither is exactly a good look for a world leader or our country. Frankly, anyone trying to claim Boris Johnson is not a serial fibber is delusional. We've swallowed so many by this point, he seems to think he can get away with anything. But we knew from the start what was entering number 10, didn't we? For Pete's sake, for most of his public life, nobody even knew how many secret kids the man had. The same man who would invent sources and quotes as a journalist is simply continuing the corner-cutting, flippant and shady behaviour, but in the highest office of the land. Quite how far a pathological liar will go to cover up massive clangers to an entire country is now the disturbing question, when lots of us assume we've just had a whole new slew of COVID restrictions foisted upon us, costing the economy £4 billion a month to distract from the party that categorically did not happen. That is one hell of an expensive dead cat, folks. It's government by soundbite. A whole load of catchy quotes and focus groups on steroids and farcical screeching U-turns, all designed to make sure Boris is loved, that his big old yellow head makes us smile, that Bojo still has his mojo. Forget running the country, there's a big baby's ego to stroke. But what are they actually doing, these cheese and wine quaffing characters in number 10? Because when they aren't playing Secret Santa, they're stabbing each other in the back, or briefing about dogs peeing on handbags and using a random dictionary generator to come up with 3-word slogans. Who is running things? The in-betweeners? It seems to me that the only things that actually do get initiated all happen to the government, not by the government, and usually in the form of countless inquiries. In fact, at this point, there are so many inquiries into inquiries and U-turns on U-turns, you have to wonder whether there's even time for governance at all. Just a psychotic spin machine on steroids that makes the thick of it look like a masterclass in PR. You even have to wonder if someone made the call to induce Carrie last night. At this point, very little seems far-fetched. Welcome to Borisland, folks, where nothing is quite as it seems, where you can set your clocks by how long it takes the Prime Minister to do the exact opposite of what he just said he would never do. Today, we really need to talk about hypocrisy. Joanne Nadler is a Conservative commentator and author who worked in the party press machine under John Major's government. Joanne,
Alex,
where do we begin? I mean, when I was writing that monologue this morning and doing a little audit of the things that came to mind, I thought, well, this is crackers, absolutely crackers. How is he still in position?
It's an extraordinary record, isn't it? An extraordinary record. Look, in many ways, though, I think hypocrisy isn't really the problem. I think people are fairly cynical and we're all prepared to put up with a degree of hypocrisy. I think what's really dangerous now for this government and for Boris Johnson is the charge of incompetence. And that's what really did for the John Major's government. I was there in those days when the phrase "get back to basics" was coined, and it was originally actually intended to be something to do with bringing back sort of basic standards in education, would you believe it? But because it coincided with a number of revelations about sexual impeccadillos on behalf of ministers, and then falling out of the ERM and various things happened, that the government became more and more split over Brexit, and well, it wasn't Brexit in those days, but eventually led to Brexit over Maastricht. And eventually, I think it was a combination of all of those things, but fundamentally a sense of incompetence and drift and a split party that was perhaps and possibly far more dangerous for the government than just the simple charge of hypocrisy, which was pinned to the back to basics idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because with this party, I think actually, if Boris Johnson said, it's my understanding that there was a gathering in Downing Street, I'm looking into it, it should never have happened, and said that a week ago, people would have probably said, OK, fine, whatever. Same with the wallpaper, same with the holidays. It's just it's a long list of lots of little pettifoggering and lies.
That's right, yeah.
And what concerns me is it occurred to me, well, it's one thing for people to think the Prime Minister's a fibber. It's quite another if other world leaders think that. That besmirches our entire country.
Well, I mean, I think that our reputation abroad is built on all sorts of things. It's never just based on the Prime Minister at that moment. And I think, you know, in many ways, perhaps Boris Johnson's reputation abroad may be better than it is at home domestically. If you you look at what he's tried to achieve on the international scene with COP26, particularly. Now, I would have my reservations about that agenda, but given he's put it front and central of his international efforts, then perhaps he's viewed better abroad. Who knows? But I mean, there is so much in what you said in the opening here that needs to be unpacked about an evasive culture. And I think that, to me, is what came across from the video that was revealed, with Allegra Stratton doing her rehearsal. Because what she was rehearsing, essentially, was a way to avoid being straight about the question of the party. And that's what we've seen now coming back to bite the government.
Do you think Allegra should have gone? Because it seems to me a bit unfortunate that she's essentially the one who's lost her scalp in all of this, when I doubt she's the person who bought the cheese and the wine, organised the party. There must have been a lot of people involved. Has she been scapegoated?
I think that she was probably right to resign. I think it was the right thing to do. But the fact that she's done the right thing doesn't preclude other people from doing the right thing. At the moment, it's not obvious that they are doing the right thing. I mean, even in that video, she wasn't the only person there, was she?
We've heard a lot about faction fighting inside Number 10. There were all those unsightly leaks when you had Dominic Cummings chastising the court of Queen Carrie, or Princess Nut or whatever he used to call her. And it does sound to me like sixth form politics.
Well, I think this is the really dangerous thing. I mean, you look at Number 10 and what you see now is a vacuum of authority. There's no leadership from the top, apparently. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to know what's going on within his own building, whether it's about something as potentially unimportant as a party, albeit that, you know, it was at that critical moment when other people couldn't have parties. But also, what else does he not know about? You know, what else doesn't he know about in terms of the wider political agenda and the details? And what people have always known, I think, and sort of accepted, taken on the chin about Boris Johnson, is that perhaps he's not a details person. So he managed to be a very successful Mayor of London because he surrounded himself with a very strong team. He effectively wasn't, you know, he was the figurehead to an operation that was run by other people. Now, what seems to be the case now at Number 10 is that he doesn't have those people around him to run that operation. And, you know, in the last 2 years, some very, very good people and some controversial people have been in and out of Number 10 and they've departed. And who's there now? We don't really know. We don't really know quite why they're letting this incredible sense of drift effectively infect the whole of government.
I mean, people might say that things like the screeching U-turns just show democracy, shows that he's being responsive to public opinion and changing policy. But do you think this government is far too concerned with polling and focus groups and managing the reputation of the Prime Minister, and as a result is not getting on with the nitty-gritty day job of making a decision and sticking to it? Because we've seen bits of HS2 now that's stripped off. It seems to me they make announcements and nothing gets done.
The impression given is that this government doesn't know what it's for. That it had a very clear agenda when Boris Johnson took over from Theresa May, and that was to get Brexit done. And to his credit, he did, you know, with certain caveats that you mentioned earlier. But he did get Brexit done. And that created a huge potential area of policy for Boris Johnson to pursue. Now, he pursued it by replacing Get Brexit Done with levelling up, and in itself a very laudable aim. But there doesn't seem to have really been a kind of a collective effort through all departments working towards that aim of levelling up. There's a sort of philosophical drift, a lack of sort of ideological direction, and that has to be blamed on Boris Johnson. He is the leader, and leadership comes from the top. So in a sense, I wouldn't expect him necessarily to be across every detail of every department. Of course not. But he should be there driving through the main philosophical direction of the government. And it's really not evident that he's done that or that he could even articulate it very clearly himself. I think there was a moment at the Conservative Party conference this year when he made his speech, when many of us who'd been, rather holding our breaths about, whether or not this man was really up to the job, we felt suddenly relieved because I think he did begin to articulate something that sounded quite interesting and as though he really got some of the big issues and he was on board with the culture wars and he was able to sort of talk about levelling up in a way that I think was very consistent with some of the ideas that came out of Brexit. But where's all that gone? You feel it was just a speech and then the next day we were on to something else.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Joanne, it's been wonderful having you in the studio and lovely talking to you today.
My pleasure.
Well, joining me now is Edwina Currie, former Conservative MP and Junior Health Minister under Margaret Thatcher. Edwina, great to have you on the programme. What's your verdict of Mr Johnson and the latest peccadillo?
Well, I've been listening, Alex, with great interest and with steam coming out of my ears. I mean, goodness me, if we're talking about hypocrites, and you had somebody on who used to work for John Major, if we're talking about incompetence, you're talking about that particular government back in the 1990s. It absolutely fell apart because it couldn't do anything right. What we have here is one of the dominant figures of modern politics. I mean, whether you like Boris or you don't like him, whether you agree with him or you don't agree with him, the fact is that nobody talks about anybody else. There is absolutely, he's a colossus amongst the political figures of the day. Nobody is suggesting that he's a saint. I must say, congratulations to him on the birth of yet another child. He must be well up in the pantheon of prime ministers who've had lots of children. And that says something about a man of 57, doesn't it? But the one thing Joanne said that, of course, was right was that this government was elected in order to do Brexit. And the previous government, which was headed by a saint, was not able to do that. You needed a streak of ruthlessness actually to drive through Brexit, to get a big majority in the House of Commons, to win the support of the nation, and particularly here in the north of England where I live. I'm in one of the new blue wall seats. And I think it would be nonsense to suggest that, having done that, the Prime Minister doesn't have any principles. This is simply not true. What we then found ourselves with, as did every other country in the world, was a global pandemic with a really vicious killer virus, which has packed off at least 150,000 people in this country, which has caused absolute mayhem in the NHS. I mean, my husband died of cancer last year, and we were able to look after him at home. He couldn't be hospitalised because of so much COVID, and it was much better for him not to go anywhere near a hospital. So I share the grief and the pain of a lot of people that are anxious about it. Now, the particular incident that has come to light this week happened last year. That does rather diminish its importance. And of course, it was stupid of them either to have a party, both to have a party and to joke about it. That was really stupid. And I think Allegra Stratton's position then became completely untenable.
But the problem here isn't so much the Christmas party, is it? The problem is the fact that he spent a week obfuscating, circumlocuting, not telling the truth, not dealing with it. He did the same thing when it came to Owen Patterson, saying that no, the watchdog needed to be investigated. He did the same thing about wallpaper, he did the same thing about holidays. It's lie after lie after lie. The man's a liar, isn't he?
Alex, you've invited me on, let me talk, right? I listened to you for 10 minutes talking rubbish. And if I may, let me just respond to some of those points.
Sorry.
Right, you talk about obfuscating and so on. Sometimes the Prime Minister hesitates, and that's a good thing to do. He doesn't always respond to all the headlines, and that's brilliant. We've had Prime Ministers in the past who responded to every headline and sacked people left, right and centre, and thus destroyed the confidence that anybody had in any member of the government. Nobody wanted to serve there. Boris doesn't do it like that. He's very loyal. I don't know him personally, but he seems to be willing to think hard about what is actually happening. He was wrong on Owen Patterson, right? And he was wrong to allow any parties in the premises that belong to all of us at number 10, assuming, of course, that he did know about them. I'm perfectly happy to accept he didn't know. Remember at the time, a year ago. You are cutting him no slack whatsoever. And I don't think that's the public view. Remember at the time a year ago, they had a 7-month-old baby. Plus, his wife was pregnant again with the baby that she lost in January. She had a miscarriage in January, so she may not have been very well. I can well understand that he was distracted by all of that. Now, I mean, you may well say, well, a prime minister shouldn't be distracted by having babies, right? And I might agree with you, but actually that's not the position that we're in. During the pandemic, this government has pulled out all the stops in so many ways, like actually backing lots of vaccines and ordering them well in advance of them being approved or being shown to be effective. That way you end up with at least some that are going to work. And that's been shown in the fact that we have a very high proportion of our people vaccinated. Most of the people who are in hospital right now are not vaccinated, or they have other serious underlying problems. Look, I think you should give them some credit for all of that. I really do.
I'm not discrediting good things the government have done. I'm not discrediting that at all. What I'm pointing out is there has been a series now, basically since he first walked through that door of number 10, of fibs, let's say, peccadillos and fibs. I mean, let's look at the Matt Hancock incident, for instance. No. Should that have been going on? Should he have resigned?
Well, and you know, with respect, you use words like peccadillos and fibs. These sound to me little hypocrisies of their own. If the Prime Minister actually gets asked a question and he doesn't know the answer and he says, I don't know, or I've been told this, I've been told that, that's not a fib. That's him simply saying the truth. During the pandemic, it's been very obvious that the thing has changed a lot very quickly. Our knowledge changes. Our data is always a bit behind the curve. If a Prime Minister says, I don't think we'll do this, but then the situation changes, it's more serious, we have to do this, that's not lying, that's not fibbing, that's not being peccadillos or anything like that. It's actually good government. Good government responds to changes. And one thing that has certainly happened in the last, almost 2 years now, since we've had this horrible pandemic, is absolutely unprecedented. During a pandemic like this, Alex, there are no experts because nobody else has ever lived through anything like this. And therefore, politicians have got to make a judgment. And it's a mistake. It is actually a mistake of a very fundamental kind to keep judging them on the judgments they make based on the information of the time. If it has to be changed, when the data changes. In the end, the government's job is to ensure, the public health. And I think they've actually done very, very well in the circumstances here. Perhaps it could have been done better, but that's hindsight.
You gave me a very well-practiced political answer to my question of should Matt Hancock have resigned. That's what I had asked.
Well, he has. What does it matter now?
Well, I'm asking your opinion on it.
I don't have one. He's gone. Finished. History.
OK. Thank you, Edwina. Delightful talking to you today. You put up a very robust defence of our Prime Minister. Not sure I agree with all of it. We'll be continuing this conversation throughout the show. And I do really want to know what you think. A lot of you often email me telling me I'm Boris bashing. But if you can't hold the Prime Minister of the country to account, what on earth is going on? Do also tweet me at GBNews. And we've put a poll up right now asking, are we experiencing a pandemic of political hypocrisy? Cast your vote so I get to know what you, the nation, really thinks. Now, time for a short break and a check on the weather forecast. I'm sure it's going to be bleak, but I'll try and cheer you up afterwards. Back with you shortly.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Many of us having a fairly wet end to the day, but tomorrow a bright and breezy kind of day, but there will be showers, particularly in the west, and a pretty cold feel as well with that breeze picking up. At the moment we've got low pressure to the northwest, but this weather front is slicing its way across the country, bringing outbreaks of rain and particularly some heavy bursts across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast in the next few hours. It does all tend to scoot out into the North Sea through the early hours, so things becoming drier in the east. But further west there will be showers, those showers of snow over the Scottish mountains, but at low levels hail is likely and the showers could be pretty lively. As the wet weather clears away and skies stay clear across Scotland for longest, there could be a touch of frost here, which might mean it's a little icy first thing on Friday morning. During Friday, though, much of the east dry and bright with sunny spells, and the same goes for southern England. A few showers in the southwest. Certainly lots of showers for northwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Heavy showers, rain at low levels, yes, some snow over the Scottish hills, but as I said, hail and thunder likely in those showers as well. They'll zip through on the breeze, and that breeze will make it feel chilly. Temperatures close to average, but feeling colder because of that wind. The wind and the showers all tend to fade a little through Friday evening, so many places again becoming dry and clear, and it will turn frosty, certainly across Scotland, parts of northern England as we head into the weekend. Further west, though, the cloud is gathering, and we'll see more rain pushing back into Northern Ireland initially, then into western Scotland during Saturday morning, and also rain then creeping into western parts of England and Wales before Saturday lunchtime. The easternmost parts of England stay largely dry through Saturday, but it will cloud over and it will feel cold here after that frosty start. Slowly but surely, as the rain arrives elsewhere, it'll start to turn milder. A milder day for all on Sunday, but a predominantly cloudy day with some rain and the winds picking up once more, particularly so on Sunday night.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, in a moment, how worried do we actually need to be about Omicron? But first, it's time for the news headlines with Tamsin.
Thanks, Alex. Here are the latest headlines. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis says they're looking into several claims. He also says the Cabinet Office will liaise with police if anything illegal is uncovered. The investigation follows a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about breaking restrictions just days after one of the alleged events. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Police have disrupted 7 late-stage terror attacks since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Counter-terrorism policing say the latest figures take the total number of foiled terrorism plots in the last 4 years to 32. The Scottish Finance Secretary has confirmed income tax rates will stay the same next year. Kate Forbes announced the freeze during the budget at Holyrood this afternoon. Other measures include an increase in the minimum wage for public sector staff to £10.50 per hour. It's the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. And it's been announced that the Prime Minister will spend some time with his family after his wife Carrie gave birth to a baby girl earlier today. It's the couple's second child after the birth of their son Wilfred in April 2020. A spokeswoman for the couple has said both mother and daughter are doing very well. I'll be back with a full news update at the top of the hour.
New COVID restrictions in England will help the government to buy time against the spread of the Omicron variant and help to prevent a crisis in the NHS. That's according to Health Secretary Sajid Javid. The measures, which kick off from Monday, include work-from-home guidance, COVID passes for many venues, as well as masks in the vast majority of public places. The announcement came on the same day Allegra Stratton resigned amidst allegations of Downing Street parties. Javid denies the government has lost credibility over the broken rules. Well, joining us now is Jamie Jenkins, an independent statistician and former head of health statistics for the ONS. Jamie, great to have you on board. Were you surprised that the government announced these COVID restrictions on Wednesday? Because as far as I can tell, Omicron is now in about 36 countries around the world and there hasn't been a single death reported.
No, Alex, and I suppose to my surprise, I was fully expecting something to happen in December. I think 3 or 4 months ago, Boris Johnson was talking about we may move to Plan B if the NHS starts becoming overrun. And I predicted back then, I thought, well, we normally see the NHS start struggling around December time, but this isn't really COVID that's causing any issues with the NHS overall, because we've actually, over the last few weeks, several weeks now, Alex, been seeing a number of cases of COVID in hospital coming down. They have crept up a little bit in England the last couple of days, but they're significantly down now. We've seen in the most recent numbers as well that the number of patients in critical care has been coming down. So overall, the impact of COVID on the NHS has kind of been diminishing. Now, yesterday you had Chris Whitty presenting, I think, the chart of the rise in cases in the Omicron variant in the UK, but they're coming from very low numbers to even, they're going up slightly, but they're very low numbers to even slightly higher low numbers. So they're trying to obviously act quickly, but the information coming out of South Africa at the moment is that this virus is a little bit more transmissible, or maybe more transmissible but less deadly. That's no bad thing. It does look to me that this has possibly been rushed out to try and get the headlines of this party that was going on in Downing Street off the front pages, I think.
I mean, that's a pretty wild statement, isn't it? That a government would impose restrictions on its own people. It would curtail people's liberties just to try and dodge some bad headlines. And, these restrictions are estimated to be costing the economy around £4 billion a month. If what you're saying is, has any basis, that's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think so, Alex. Now, let's look at what Plan B means. So working from home and these vaccine passes that are in the country. Now, I live in Wales. They're already here. They're already in Scotland. I put up my Twitter feed, the daily stats and stuff. And the case rates between England, Scotland and Wales aren't very different. You wouldn't even, if you put that in front of somebody and said, can you see where Scotland and Wales have put some vaccine passports in? You wouldn't even notice on the data when you start looking at the trends. And France has had vaccine passes, Ireland, Germany, all these countries, cases have continued to go up. Now, let's just look at the actual passes themselves. What you can see is that France said you couldn't go into a nightclub unless you were vaccinated. Ireland the same. And what have they gone and done now? They've actually closed the nightclubs when only vaccinated people could go in the first place. So these vaccine passports, they don't really do what people think they might do, which is to reduce the spread of COVID. So I think it's a bit bonkers in terms of what they're kind of taking that approach. They say they're following the science and the evidence in the past. It's quite clear that's been thrown out the window, Alex. And it's just shocking that I think this is probably going to be enforced now until at least March, these restrictions, because I would expect COVID patients to go up over Christmas and into the new year. Only reason being, Alex, this is a respiratory virus. And when you're testing as many people in the UK as we are, you are going to pick the cases up, and then some of those will end up in hospital. But it's 60% lower than this time last year, and deaths are around 80% lower than this time last year. So this is not the same pandemic that we were in last year, but kind of the rhetoric coming out of government and from SAGE is that, this kind of deadly Omicron, which we don't know, is going to take over. And I think it's causing a lot of mental anxiety issues across the country.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it does seem staggering to me. Every year we know we have a crisis affecting the NHS. That's been happening for decades now. Do you think the government's now invented a big button that because there's always overcrowding and crises in the NHS every winter, they can just hit that button and say, right, that's it, everybody stay at home?
I think so, Alex. So I've seen some medics posting on social media saying that cancer cancellations of cancer treatment because of patients of COVID in hospital. Now, did a quick Google search today, typed in 2019 cancer cancellations, Guardian article. Before COVID was even here, bed shortages have meant that going into the winter, bed shortages mean cancer operations are being cancelled. This has been going on for a long, long time. But now COVID's arrived. People are just jumping on this. Oh, well, we've locked the country down last year. We're not actually going as far at the moment, so they can put up with this. Not even ruling out mandatory vaccination. I've had 2 jabs of the vaccine, but I'm dead against, obviously, mandatory vaccination. Boris Johnson shouldn't even be talking about having a conversation about it. It should just be straight, no, we're not going to go down that road. So, the boosters are having a big effect at the moment, Alex, in terms of reducing the number of cases in older people. That's how we've managed the flu in the past. Protect the vulnerable. My concern as we go through this winter is, looking last week that GPs can reduce some of the primary care that they provide to older people in terms of health checks to start rolling out the booster to younger people. We've seen significant numbers of deaths over and above average for the time of year in homes. We've seen 80,000 excess deaths at home since the start of the pandemic from all causes. People are dying from not just COVID in this country. And it just seems to me that, the government's very blinkered, that all they got is SAGE thinking of COVID, COVID, COVID. We've got to think of everything rather than just one thing.
Does it make sense to you why the government would give the advice to work from home, but then at the same time say, oh, no, you can still have your parties, go on, still have your festive fun? I mean, that just doesn't seem to add up to me. What's going on there?
Well, I think it's just in part the kind of the confusion about some of the mixed messaging we've had over the last 18 months. Now, you think people are saying, don't go to the office, work from home, but if people are going to follow that now, and they won't be going to offices, so obviously they're not going to go out to the Christmas parties. So I feel for the hospitality sector in all of this because, there's going to be swathes of cancellations of office kind of parties that have been booked into restaurants and pubs over the next kind of 10 days. They're all going to be cut by the wayside. And then you think we're all going to be paying extra tax now for the NHS and social care from April through increases in national insurance. And the economic damage that this causes when we're not even sure this is anything to worry about at this stage, is just, why are we doing this? That's got to be looked at. And it just seemed to come up rather quickly. Well, how can Boris put this kind of emergency cabinet call in yesterday to talk about this? Then a press briefing was kind of wheeled out. It does seem to have been a knee-jerk reaction over some of the data. And I just think, we need to follow the data, follow the science. But I think this is an overreaction. And I don't think, Alex, whilst it imposes the restrictions in England, it will have any material effect because it's not doing that in Scotland and Wales.
Jamie, it's been great having you on and getting your insight into this. I'm as confused as you are, I can tell you that much. Jamie Jenkins, who's ex-head of health statistics at the ONS. And when that guy can't wrap his head around why the government's suddenly imposing restrictions based upon the data that he's got, then who on earth is going to understand what this is all about? We're going to be talking a lot more about this during the programme, and there's also lots more to come after the break, so do stay with us. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back, folks. Now, of course, we are talking about those new COVID restrictions announced yesterday. And earlier, our Northwest reporter Bradley Harris spoke to a nightclub owner to find out how the government's Plan B COVID restrictions will affect his business and the nighttime industry.
December is a massive month for nightclubs, for big venues up and down the country. So for many people here on Canal Street in Manchester, which is lined with nightclubs which are open past 1 o'clock in the morning, all have dance floors, all will be impacted by the new coronavirus measures that were introduced by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson last night. Of course, some of which start tomorrow. That's mandatory face coverings, which are in more public settings in England. On Monday, we'll have the working from home order for those that can do that. And then on Wednesday, we've got the NHS COVID pass and a negative lateral flow test. Those are one of two things that you can provide should you want to enter nightclubs that you see behind me. Of course, for many people who own nightclubs, I was speaking to John Hamilton earlier. He's the owner of Bar Pop here on Canal Street. He had his concerns on these new restrictions. Let's just hear what he had to say.
The impact for us is obviously we now have to get staff in to actually manage that process of getting people inside our venues that are over the capacity of 500. So that will be time consuming. We can put it in place and we will put it in place and operate our venues safely through that way. This time of year is our party season. Our party season where we earn most of our money to carry us through our dark times of January and February. And at the moment, we can see cancellations of events and bookings that are already coming in. And we are now looking, thinking, are we going to take enough money to survive? And it is that bad. We are now at the point where we have dropped about 30% of take. That means that we can survive this section, but we don't have any savings ready for the quiet times.
Very interesting hearing John Hamilton's thoughts there from a nightclub owner's point of view. Of course, the government are introducing these restrictions because they want to try and slow the spread of the Omicron variant. They don't want to see the NHS overloaded, and this is one way of trying to combat that by introducing these new restrictions. Of course, as you heard from John, some frustrations there, an annoyance, he was telling me, that these restrictions are back in place. One of the biggest months for big venues such as nightclubs. Of course, we've got New Year's Eve as well to think about, a big night for parties. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming days when these restrictions get introduced, some of which start from tomorrow, how the public react. Of course, we've got to remember as well that in Wales and in Scotland and Northern Ireland, many of these restrictions have already been in place. And actually, it's interesting to hear from the Nighttime Industries Association that say on COVID passes, which have been implemented in Scotland and Wales, they say, of course, a 30% and 26% drop off in trade respectively. So interesting to hear that. But yeah, of course, we'll have to wait and see in the coming days and weeks whether people will come out and actually show proof that they've been double jabbed, or show proof that they have had a negative PCR test result in the last 48 hours, or whether people will simply cancel their plans altogether.
Well, today I'm asking, is the UK experiencing a pandemic of political hypocrisy? Oh, lots of you have been sending in your views. One viewer says, what Prime Minister is perfect? The answer is none. Boris may not be perfect, but look at what he has done since being in office. The bigger problem in this country is that we have no alternative party to challenge him. Another says, watching Conservative MPs supporting Boris is embarrassing, as he has clearly lied to Parliament and the public. Stratton thought it was funny. Internal investigations will be a slow whitewash. This is now the norm in Westminster. Another viewer angry at Boris, saying, very easy to find out whom in number 10 premises on party-said dates. Every establishment and offices are required by law to have sign-in and sign-out registers in case of fires, etc., and to know how many people are in the building. Or is number 10 different? I'm unable to see why security must be paramount in number 10. Interesting point. Now, time for a short break, but don't go anywhere. First, it's the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Many of us having a fairly wet end to the day, but tomorrow a bright and breezy kind of day, but there will be showers, particularly in the west, and a pretty cold feel as well with that breeze picking up. At the moment we've got low pressure to the northwest, but this weather front is slicing its way across the country, bringing outbreaks of rain and particularly some heavy bursts across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast in the next few hours. It does all tend to scoot out into the North Sea through the early hours, so things becoming drier in the east. But further west there will be showers, those showers of snow over the Scottish mountains, but at low levels hail is likely and the showers could be pretty lively. As the wet weather clears away and skies stay clear across Scotland for longest, there could be a touch of frost here, which might mean it's a little icy first thing on Friday morning. During Friday, though, much of the east dry and bright with sunny spells, and the same goes for southern England. A few showers in the southwest, certainly lots of showers for northwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Heavy showers, rain at low levels, yes, some snow over the Scottish hills, but as I said, hail and thunder likely in those showers as well. They'll zip through on the breeze, and that breeze will make it feel chilly. Temperatures close to average, but feeling colder because of that wind. The wind and the showers all tend to fade a little through Friday evening, so many places again becoming dry and clear, and it will turn frosty, certainly across Scotland, parts of northern England as we head into the weekend. Further west, though, the cloud is gathering, and we'll see more rain pushing back into Northern Ireland initially, then into western Scotland during Saturday morning, and also rain then creeping into western parts of England and Wales before Saturday lunchtime. The easternmost parts of England stay largely dry through Saturday, but it will cloud over and it will feel cold here after that frosty start. Slowly but surely, as the rain arrives elsewhere, it'll start to turn milder. A milder day for all on Sunday, but a predominantly cloudy day with some rain and the winds picking up once more, particularly so on Sunday night.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi, I'm Alistair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years and I've made lots of friends, and I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alistair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3 every Saturday and Sunday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. The British Medical Journal will, for the first time, back an accredited lifestyle medicine course for doctors next week. The increasingly popular practice involves making lifestyle changes to improve mental and physical well-being, like healthy eating and physical activity, social interaction and positive sleeping patterns. There is evidence to support the success of behavioural change, and some doctors believe that it can help reduce overprescription of medication and strain on the NHS. Well, joining us now is Dr. Angela Goyle, an NHS GP and the director of Inspired Medics. They offer lifestyle medicine and social prescribing courses to patients. Great to have you on, Angela. Tell us more about lifestyle medicine. It sounds a little bit sort of flimsy, but actually it's very important. It's about taking care of ourselves so we don't get sick.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, that's precisely what it is. Not only prevention of illness, but also the treatment of illness. And there's lots of evidence out there for behind diet, exercise, good sleep patterns, reducing stress and reducing toxins, and how this can not only prevent diseases, but also treat diseases. We know that type 2 diabetes, that this can be treated with diet alone more successfully than with pharmaceutical interventions. But there's a huge reliance in the NHS on pharmaceutical drugs only and not giving enough advice on lifestyle interventions. So back in 2018, I set up courses training healthcare professionals and doctors in lifestyle medicine. And the popularity is really growing. So much so, as you've mentioned, that the BMJ are now collaborating with us to bring this education to even more health professionals and doctors in the UK.
I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Don't overeat if you don't want to get fat and develop things such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes. You know, make sure you sleep properly, that you have good sleeping patterns. I mean, surely this is what we should be doing as a society. But the truth is, we are doing the opposite, aren't we, in the West? And our lifestyles are having a major impact on our health.
Yeah, absolutely. There seems to be a perception amongst the public and healthcare professionals that pharmaceutical medicines will solve things for us. And that's simply not true. The lifestyle interventions, when I've implemented these with my patients, they have a greater beneficial impact on my patients. So, for example, for depression, if we look at changing things in our diet, sleep, stress levels, spending time in nature, improving our social connection, that has a huge impact on patients with mental health problems and physical health problems. And that training really needs to infiltrate all doctors and healthcare professionals in the UK. It's growing, and I'm really pleased to see the BMJ collaborating with Inspired Medics to bring this training to even more healthcare professionals. But really, it needs to be embedded in every medical school and in every healthcare professional training.
And what sort of top tips would you give to people who, if you're looking through the prism of lifestyle medicine and conducting your daily living in a way that's going to be beneficial for your health, either preventing disease or actually potentially helping to reverse certain conditions? What sort of things would you be telling people to do?
Okay, well, my tips are very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. It's not about buying expensive gym memberships or scrolling through Instagram at the latest fads. Keep it really simple. Start with one thing. So I'm also a regional director for the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and we talk about making one change. So think of one thing you want to change, whether it's improving your sleep, so turning off gadgets at 6 p.m. so that you can get a better night's sleep that's more restful for you. Or maybe you know that you're working from home and you're sitting down a lot. And it's not just about being a weekend warrior with your exercise, getting all your exercise in at the weekend, but we need to be moving more on a day-to-day basis. Even if that's just going upstairs and downstairs a few times and a quick walk around the block at lunchtime.
So essentially, it's quite easy, really, isn't it? You know, have a sensible diet, packed full of good things, you know, fish, vegetables, meat, avoid processed foods, get a good night's sleep and walk everywhere.
It is actually simple, and that is what is actually quite astounding, that we don't practice this enough. And we make health we overcomplicate it with drugs, with surgery, with lots and lots of conflicting advice about well-being. Actually, it's very simple. Unprocess your diet, get adequate sleep. We tend to know when we're stressed and we're over busy. So these are all things that we can start to address, but also believe that this can really have a significant impact on your health, whether you're healthy already or whether you're wanting to use lifestyle medicine as an adjunct to treat a disease that you may have.
Why is it that doctors now need to be trained on these things? Because they're the medical professionals, they've gone through medical school, they know how the human body works, and surely they should understand that the sort of things we're talking about are no-brainers when it comes to staying fit and healthy.
So I'm a GP, I've been to medical school, I've done GP training, I've done advanced specialist training in dermatology. At no point in that training was there anything on the benefits of physical activity. So we know physical activity reduces inflammation. That then goes on to have a beneficial effect on cardiovascular disease, even prevention of dementia, improvement in depression. There was no training on any of that, or nutrition, or the science of sleep. And that's what I started up in 2018, these courses that give healthcare professionals the tools to learn about the evidence for lifestyle medicine, so they know it's not just soft science. There are some really good studies out there that show you that this is evidence-based, and also techniques that we can use to motivate our patients. Because at the end of the day, you, I, the public, we all want to have the best health that we can get. We want to be healthy for our grandchildren. We want to live we want to live good lives and have lots of energy. And we have to believe that people are capable and want to make these changes. Modern lifestyles don't help. We overwork. We, myself included, probably don't sleep enough. It's easier to reach out for processed foods than it is to cook something healthy when you get home. So there are issues, issues of poverty and social deprivation making it harder. But social prescribing is becoming a big thing in the NHS. And that is really to address those inequalities in health. But I think it starts with an education in lifestyle medicine for healthcare professionals to really understand that these interventions can work to not only prevent, but to treat common diseases.
Dr. Angela Goyle, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this really important topic. Now, you're watching the Afternoon Agenda, and there's lots more still to come. Well, hello and welcome. If you've just joined me, I'm Alex Phillips, and this show isn't news as you know it. We debate and we discuss the big things and things that really need to be on your agenda. Still to come this hour, COVID Plan B will help prevent a crisis in the NHS, says the Health Secretary. But how much of a threat is Omicron? We'll ask the experts. Young people in New Zealand will be banned from buying cigarettes. Now, is that a good way to save lives and healthcare costs? Or is that the nanny state gone wild? And as Downing Street is embroiled in yet another unsightly peccadillo, we need to talk about hypocrisy. Are we experiencing a pandemic of political fibs? That's the agenda for the next hour. What's on yours? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me @gbnews. But first, it's time for the news with Tamsin.
Thanks, Alex. This is your news at 5 o'clock. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. During urgent questions in the House of Commons, Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis said they are looking into several claims. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about an alleged Downing Street party forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. Here's what Paymaster General had to say in the Commons earlier.
Now, I can confirm to the House that the Cabinet Secretary's investigation will establish the facts surrounding the following. Allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 27th of November 2020, a gathering at the Department for Education on the 10th of December 2020, and allegations made of a gathering at Number 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December 2020.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, whilst guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row. Conservative MP Andrew Rossendale has told GB News he'll vote against the measures.
I understand why, when the pandemic hit to begin with, none of us knew what we were facing, and the government was right to take action. Since then, I think that it has been a huge overreaction and we're not calculating the effects of lockdowns. So why, at this very point, when we're looking forward to Christmas, when businesses are really at their peak in terms of what they need to do for Christmas, to then restrict things, I don't really understand why we're doing it.
Dominic Raab and Grant Shapps are self-isolating after being in contact with the Australian Deputy Prime Minister, who has since tested positive for coronavirus. Barnaby Joyce confirmed the news while travelling in Washington, DC. The ministers had both met Mr Joyce when he was in London earlier in the week. Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross is also self-isolating after a member of his staff tested positive for COVID. Police have disrupted 7 late-stage terror attacks in the UK since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Counter-terrorism policing say the latest figures take the total number of foiled terrorism plots in the last 4 years to 32. They're also calling on people to remain vigilant over the festive period. Boris Johnson is facing renewed questions into a donation used to pay for the redecoration of his Downing Street flat. It comes after the Conservative Party was fined almost £18,000 by the Electoral Commission. It says the Tories failed to accurately report a donation and keep a proper accounting record. A party spokesperson said they were considering an appeal. The Scottish Finance Secretary has confirmed income tax rates will stay the same next year. Kate Forbes announced the freeze during the budget at Holyrood this afternoon. Other measures include a minimum wage floor at £10.50 per hour, which could mean an extra £76 a month for social care staff. It's the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. The UK is experiencing its largest ever outbreak of bird flu. Around 500,000 birds have been culled so far, with 40 infected premises across the UK. But the risk to human health remains very low, according to public health advice, and there's a low risk to food safety. The chimney at Scotland's last remaining coal-fired power station has been demolished. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon pushed the button to ignite 700 kilos of explosives to bring down the chimney, which has stood at Longannet in Fife for over 50 years. Scotland has been coal-free since the station closed in 2016. That's all for now. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Until then, it's back to Alex and the afternoon agenda.
Now, the brouhaha over the Christmas party that wasn't is just the latest in what seems to be an escalating habit of constant contradictions and fibs, peccadillos, mishaps, cover-ups and leaks that the government is struggling to overcome. At this stage, it's hard not to feel like our heads are being messed with in some kind of sick psychological experiment, the government constantly gaslighting an entire nation. We're apparently being ruled over by an insecure man-child with an allergy to the truth. And were it not for the fact that Boris gleefully looks like a character from the Bash Street Kids, I doubt any other Prime Minister would have survived so many scandals that are so absurd they could have been dreamt up by the two Ronnies. And while all journalists love a good whodunit, this constant pantomime of U-turns, contradictions, calamities and controversies all make us look like a nation of boneheads dumbly applauding an eccentric dolt. But it's really not funny. As the confusion grows, are we so delighted by Mystic Bojo's bumbling magic that we no longer care about how the country is being run? Have we forgotten that if we can't trust our Prime Minister, neither can world leaders, effectively rendering the UK a pariah state? It might just be a couple of exotic holidays, a trip to Barnard Castle, some fancy wallpaper, a little Yuletide soiree, a cheeky bit on the side, a naughty backbencher accidentally misunderstanding the rules, and a harmless bit of political spin. But this is our Prime Minister, and it's getting harder to trust him. That really ought to bother you. It smacks of a seriously misplaced sense of entitlement from a man who has got through life making it up as he goes along and fibbing when it all goes wrong. Joining me now, Lawrence Fox, leader of the Reclaim Party. What's your take on this? Are you impressed with Boris as a leader? Does he keep you smiling, or do you think this is getting absurd now?
Hi, good afternoon. Can I just first say how wonderful it is that the Prime Minister and his wife have welcomed in a new baby into the world today, because that is absolutely fantastic and so much more interesting than any of the lies and deceit that have been thrown at us by him and the team around him. I think it's appalling. I feel that his position is totally untenable. And it's very reassuring to see Conservative MPs, backbench MPs, standing up and saying, I'm done with this, because it's unscientific, it's unreasonable, and it has absolutely no basis in the science, which we've been told to follow for the last 2 years.
Yeah, is it your suspicion that the Prime Minister's essentially put a load of restrictions on us, curtailing our civil liberties yet again, forcing us to wear masks in public places, vaccine passports are coming in, essentially to distract from the fact that he's been lying about a Christmas party?
Yeah, well, Plan B didn't come in until the day after that Plan A was realised that it was the very people that were moralising to us about how we should behave. I mean, it is not that I want to make it personal to myself, but it was interesting the absolute attacks I received for being honest about how I behaved during the first lockdown, and yet now we're being lied to. And I mean, I don't know how many parties we're at now which are being investigated. I know it's 3 formally, but there are many, many more. And this whole narrative that now the media are trying to spin at us relentlessly, which is this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, is a horrendous thing. Because if you've got an African variant, where's it come from? Botswana. Is it going to be the unvaccinated that have brought that disease back into this country or not? We are living in an upside down world, and as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, let the lie come into the world, even let it triumph, but not through me. And we must now, as a country, have a very serious conversation about what we believe to be true, because we're starting to lean over into what are facts, feelings rather than facts. And his position is untenable, and the Tory press are turning against him, and so are the Tory backbenchers. And I hope he resigns, because it's appalling what the behaviour that's been displayed by our government, our elected officials.
I mean, what would happen if he did resign? Who on earth is going to take his place? Because, he must sit and have these conversations at cabinet level, and frankly, they must all be colluding in on it if he's suddenly calling forward regulations and restrictions to sate a braying media mob and prevent them banging on about, his own minor sins.
Well, as you know, Alex, next week there's an election in North Shropshire, and I think people have an opportunity to say to the Conservative Party exactly how they feel about it. And I hope they do. And I hope they also account every single Conservative MP who takes a strong stand on this and supports them. And those that don't stand against tyranny and oppression and discrimination, which is what this is, unscientific, unreasonable, illogical, I hope that they are obliterated at the next general election as well.
What on earth does Boris has that means that, he can very clearly tell a lot of half-truths. You know, at the very best, he's told half-truths. And that's been going on since the day he walked into number 10. He's also presided over sort of, screeching U-turns, onerous regulations, and yet he constantly lives to tell the tale. What's he got? What's his magic?
Well, I don't think Boris Johnson's in charge of the country. I think CCHQ are in charge of the country, and CCHQ are dominated by the civil service, and we are basically being run by, what the Americans would call the deep state. I don't think Boris seems comfortable at all in what he's doing, but he's being forgiven. There's the Ratner's moment, isn't there, from the CBI back in the 90s, where he turned around and said all our jewellery is rubbish, but who cares? And his company folded. I think Boris Johnson has reached his Ratner's moment, where the bluster and the BS has finally got to the people, and they've said, hang on a minute, my family died, and I have personal experience with this because my mother passed during that initial time, and I think people have said this has got me, and I'm so thrilled that the British people have stood and gone, this is ridiculous hypocrisy. I think his days are numbered, and I hope the number of the days that he has left are in single figures rather than double figures.
Yeah, well, paternity leave seemed to come for Boris at just the right time. I don't know how he does it. Lawrence Fox, fantastic to have you on the programme today. Well, let's talk to pollster extraordinaire. Who else but Sir John Curtis? How is this series of scandals playing out for Boris Johnson now? Because they call him the greased piglet, don't they? Or Teflon Boris. Because whatever goes on, nothing seems to stick. Is it finally going wrong for him?
Yes, I think the honest truth to that question, Alex, is that the Prime Minister is in quite a lot of trouble so far as the Court of Public Opinion is concerned. The real difficulty that he faces is that he may be finding that people now no longer believe what he says, and that mood, which of course if opposition voters said that, you would say so what, but that mood is now beginning to stretch into Conservative voters. So just to give you a couple of examples, we have a whole load of instant polls in the wake of that now infamous video from the number 10 briefing room. First of all, it's clear that a majority of people, including at least over half of Conservative voters, probably rather more, believe that there was a party in 10 Downing Street on the 18th of December. So the truth is that the Prime Minister's semi-denial stroke, it's at least suggesting that his existence is still uncertain, that stance is simply not widely believed. And that therefore we should not be surprised that when people are asked directly, as of opinion have asked them, do you think that the Prime Minister is lying or not? We're finding around 2/3 of people, including almost a half of the people who voted Conservative in 2019, saying that they think the Prime Minister is lying. And on the back of that, therefore, don't be surprised to hear that we've only had one opinion poll so far of vote intentions, and it is very early since the video was released before we'll get a real proper reading. But it says that support for the Conservatives down 4 points as compared with Monday. And bear in mind that the polls are already showing Conservative support even 2 or 3 weeks after the story was really in the news, losing a couple of points in the wake of the Owen Paterson affair. So put the two together, at the moment at least, it looks as though Conservative support may be as much as 6 points adrift of where it was before the Owen Paterson affair. And that's fairly substantial damage in the wake of stories which have in common them the claim that the Prime Minister and that those around him are inclined to bend the rules, and that while some bending the rules on some occasions is acceptable, what it isn't acceptable for is either making lives for MPs easier, because that's not something that many people believe in, rightly or wrongly, and certainly very, very, very few people believe, as we learned for Dominic Cummings' affair, believe that those who make the rules are those who can be accepted from adhering to them.
Have we got any indication of what may have happened to Johnson's personal ratings during this period? Because 2/3 of people thinking the Prime Minister is a liar is quite astonishing. But it seems to me that a lot of people out there go, well, you know, Boris, he tells a few fibs here and there, but we don't mind. Is that possibly at play?
Well, I think, Alex, you know, the crucial question we are now facing is whether or not the people's willingness to tolerate the Prime Minister's tendency to pursue an objective without necessarily following due process. That's the general comment as to whether or not people's patience for doing that has run out. And you know, as I suggested earlier, if that is the case, it will be because he's now felt to be not following due process and not necessarily being entirely straight with people over something where they just don't think the end justifies the means. Now, you know, certainly, you know, the Conservative Party itself is now less popular than it has been at any point since 2019. And Boris Johnson's personal satisfaction ratings have certainly been in gradual decline. So, you know, he's still not as unpopular as John Major was during the height of the unpopularity of his regime, or indeed Gordon Brown in his. But there was never a time when people questioned the probity of either John Major or Gordon Brown. People might have felt they were being incompetent in the job, but nobody ever suggested that they weren't doing the job properly. The problem facing Boris Johnson is that it looks as though people are beginning to question his probity, and that perhaps in the end is more serious for voters than just simple apparent incompetence.
Yeah, it is indeed, and quite serious for the country too, I'd imagine. Thank you so much, John Curtis, absolute legend of the polling world. Now, Alex Proud is an entrepreneur and founder of the Proud Group, who run cabaret performances and burlesque shows. Much talk about whether the COVID restrictions are a dead cat to distract us from Downing Street's misdemeanors. Well, it's an expensive dead cat for your industry, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, hugely so. I mean, we're having we're literally just going, we're making some money back. We're having to repay the huge amount of debt we all had to take on to survive being shut down for a year or so when the government gave us no compensation, unlike the rest of Europe, which had generous compensation for the entertainment industry. And just as we're starting to pay that debt back, we have to pay the price for Boris's incompetence. And I suppose, where we come from is this anger of watching you and other people talk about Boris's incompetence. We're at the bad end of this. We're the ones who are paying for it, quite literally paying for the government's incompetence. And that is really, really tough to cope with. It makes us very angry, and we're furious right now. I mean, viscerally furious with anger at being the butt of Boris's incompetence.
Hey, it's more than incompetence, isn't it, when the suggestion is that restrictions have been brought in to distract from essentially naughtiness in the Prime Minister's residence. I mean, that's a really bold claim. Is there anything that you're now planning to do about this? And, you're going to go to the government and lobby them and say, you can't do this to my industry?
Yes, I mean, the NTIA, the Nighttime Industry Association, I set this up several years ago. You've probably spoken to Michael. He's a great spokesman, and we aggressively lobby the government. But as you well know, the problem is that the traditional sense of cabinet government. I mean, I've been on Zoom calls with the business minister, someone who is a cabinet minister, who has told me in previous instances there will be no lockdown, and the next day we had a lockdown, because the reality is that no one outside Boris and the Chancellor really know what's going to happen the next day. So how can you lobby a government that is represented by basically 2 or 3 cabinet ministers? This isn't the way democracy is supposed to function. And, we don't have a functioning parliament where you have an opposition that, the opposition is sitting there going, let's double down, let's have more restrictions. There isn't a political party that represents common sense right now. And what we all need to remember here is the civil service, the government's own advice on vaccine passports was they made literally no difference to the ability of this disease to spread. It's a completely and utterly PR-based decision based on no science whatsoever, and also has a horrible precedent in terms of being a democracy. We're supposed to be The reason we booted Napoleon in the backside was we're not the French, we're not the Germans. We value our individual liberty, and yet we seem to be blindly going down this alleyway into a very European mode of control over society. The moment we're showing vaccine passports, we all know the police and everyone else will jump on this and go, oh, hang on, that can be used as your ID papers. And then suddenly a policeman can stop me in the street and say, I want your ID papers. And I don't want a policeman or anyone else to have a reason to stop me. I despise vaccine passports on that basis, and on the basis they have no science behind them, and they will, in Scotland and Wales, they drop bookings by 25 to 30%. So I and my industry are going to lose all of that money just to make Boris look like he's doing something to cover up for the fact that he was partying. He's an idiot, and as you said, a liar, and it's frustrating to see our industry suffer to cope with that. That makes me really angry. I mean, I want to swear with anger. I won't, don't worry, but I'm close.
I'm ready if you do. I'm going to make an instant apology and beg Ofcom for forgiveness. Now, are you in a position to actually take a stand over this in terms of the government say you must have vaccine passports? Are you going to say we're not going to actually introduce that at my venues, or even say, well, if you're going to make us introduce vaccine passports, I'll shut my venues? Or do you feel like you're essentially being bounced into something that you can't even take a stand?
The problem we have here, Alex, is when we had all the restrictions when we reopened last year, with those weird bits when we were opened with distancing and limits, I tried to push the envelope then, and the problem is that the powers are horrifying. I got slapped with a £5,000 fine. If I didn't pay that within 2 days, they closed my venue. So your ability here, the problem is, I'm at the hard end of that legislation, which everyone forgets is still in power, which is basically worse than any legislation that was in existence in the Second World War. It gives the government complete power over you, and the councils will use that. If you give councils and the police power, they will use it, and that's the problem. Whenever you give people power, they rarely give it back. I desperately want to stand up against it, but if I do, I'll be closed within minutes. What I will do, Alex, and I think most people in our industry will do, is we will try to operate this in a way that is beneficial to our customers to the extent we're allowed to. We will look at the legislation carefully, the wording of it, and we will try to be as forgiving as we can, because I don't agree with it morally. I don't agree with it in science. I think it's a ridiculous piece of nonsense. So we will try to think our way around it, but our options are extremely limited because the police and the council have a lot of power, and sadly we don't.
Yeah, we live in a police state now, don't we? Alex, lovely having you on, and I'm sorry that you're having to go through all of this again. Alex Cloud there. Well, time to put on the kettle, get yourself a cuppa, have a peek out the window. Here's the weather forecast. Back with you shortly.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Many of us having a fairly wet end to the day, but tomorrow a bright and breezy kind of day, but there will be showers, particularly in the west. And a pretty cold feel as well with that breeze picking up. At the moment we've got low pressure to the northwest, but this weather front is slicing its way across the country, bringing outbreaks of rain and particularly some heavy bursts across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast in the next few hours. It does all tend to scoot out into the North Sea through the early hours, so things becoming drier in the east. But further west there will be showers, those showers of snow over the Scottish mountains, but at low levels hail is likely and the showers could be pretty lively. As the wet weather clears away and skies stay clear across Scotland for longest, there could be a touch of frost here, which might mean it's a little icy first thing on Friday morning. During Friday, though, much of the east dry and bright with sunny spells, and the same goes for southern England. A few showers in the southwest. Certainly lots of showers for northwest England, Wales, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Heavy showers, rain at low levels, yes, some snow over the Scottish hills, but as I said, hail and thunder likely in those showers as well. They'll zip through on the breeze, and that breeze will make it feel chilly. Temperatures close to average, but feeling colder because of that wind. The wind and the showers all tend to fade a little through Friday evening, so many places again becoming dry and clear, and it will turn frosty, certainly across Scotland, parts of northern England as we head into the weekend. Further west, though, the cloud is gathering, and we'll see more rain pushing back into Northern Ireland initially, then into western Scotland during Saturday morning, and also rain then creeping into western parts of England and Wales before Saturday lunchtime. The easternmost parts of England stay largely dry through Saturday, but it will cloud over and it will feel cold here after that frosty start. Slowly but surely, as the rain arrives elsewhere, it'll start to turn milder. A milder day for all on Sunday, but a predominantly cloudy day with some rain and the winds picking up once more, particularly so on Sunday night.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Nana Aquia, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines. You can look up the statistics. No, you look it up. I hug everyone. We'll learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back to the afternoon agenda on GB News. Now let's get a check on those news headlines with Tamsin.
Thanks, Alex. The Cabinet Secretary will now investigate 3 alleged parties in Downing Street and Whitehall during lockdown last year. Cabinet Minister Michael Ellis says they're looking into several claims. He also says the Cabinet Office will liaise with police if anything illegal is uncovered. The investigation follows a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about breaking restrictions just days after one of the alleged events. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. New restrictions include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues, such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Police have disrupted 7 late-stage terror attacks since the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Counter-terrorism policing say the latest figures take the total number of foiled terrorism plots in the last 4 years to 32. The Scottish Finance Secretary has confirmed income tax rates will stay the same next year. Kate Forbes announced the freeze during the budget at Holyrood this afternoon. Other measures include an increase in the minimum wage for public sector staff to £10.50 per hour. It's the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. And it's been announced that the Prime Minister will spend some time with his family after his wife Carrie gave birth to a baby girl earlier today. It's the couple's second child after the birth of their son Wilfred in April 2020. A spokeswoman for the couple has said both mother and daughter are doing very well. That's all for now. I'll bring you a full news update at the top of the hour.
Thank you, Tamsin. The new COVID restrictions being introduced in England are to buy time, in the Health Secretary Sajid Javid's words, amid concerns about the Omicron variant and its spread. Under what the government refers to as Plan B, the new measures will include work-from-home guidance, masks in most public places and COVID passes for many venues. But is this a knee-jerk overreaction or an inconvenience but ultimately necessary course of action? Well, Dr. Andrew Preston is a microbiologist at the University of Bath. Andrew, how worried do you think we should be about Omicron? Because it seems to me it's in most countries now, we don't seem to have had any deaths from it.
Too early for that yet, Alex. It's still taking hold. Numbers of cases is growing rapidly, but still relatively small. And we know there's a significant lag between onset of infection and the very worst manifestations of that infection in terms of ICU care and death. Still early days yet, so the honest truth is we don't know how this is going to play out.
And do you think the government are doing the right thing by introducing Plan B and the slate of regulations that they've put in place? Have they gone too far? Does it make sense? Are they not going far enough?
If the motivation is to try and slow down the spread, then these measures will do that to some degree. It's hard to know exactly how much that will slow down the spread, because, of course, we don't know how strongly people will adhere to them. It's certainly not going to stop the spread by any means. So, again, if the rationale is that we need to slow down the spread in order to try and get, buy more time to get more boosters into people that will ultimately protect, then it does make sense, of course.
Turns out that Omicron is a mutation which is particularly virulent and manages to get about the place pretty quickly, but doesn't seem to cause severe illness. Should we actually drop the regulations and become quite comfortable with community transmission, or would that be potentially creating another storm and another mutation down the road?
No, so I mean, you're right. So just because it's infecting at a very high rate doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cause more disease. But of course, the problem is at the moment we just don't know that. So if the data, I think, does show that actually you can have high caseloads without the dreaded impact on people's health and certainly the health service, then I would expect the restrictions to be eased again. And we'll be very much in the situation we've been living with since unlocking back in July. So throughout the summer and the autumn, we've had really quite high case rates. But fortunately, a relatively low number of hospitalizations and deaths that plateaued at the worst, and even signs of dropping over recent days. And so I think those will still be the drivers by which decisions are made.
There's been a lot of chit-chat out there that if this is a very mild version, albeit, very easily transmitted, that could actually be a good thing. Do you sort of subscribe to that school of thought?
I don't think it's a good thing, but I understand where people are coming from, that it's going to obviously lead to high levels of natural boosting of people's immunity. So certainly, it might, a highly infectious variant that doesn't necessarily cause lots of disease might buffer against importation of another variant that's worse. And so, we think that other variants have been kept out of the UK over the summer by them having to compete against Delta, for example. But unfortunately, a highly infectious variant does mean there's going to be a lot more cases, and ultimately that will lead to spillover into those people that are still vulnerable to the very serious manifestations of the infections. So it's certainly not something that's a good thing, but clearly if it's highly infectious but not particularly virulent, then that's certainly better than one of the scenarios we're looking at the moment.
Insight into these matters, Dr. Andrew Preston, their microbiologist at the University of Bath. Well, joining me now is Angus Dalgleish, an oncologist at St George's Hospital at the University of London. Thanks for coming in. Do you think this is all a bit of a confected panic? I mean, we spoke, didn't we, last week about the fact that Omicron may well be a far milder strain, but all of a sudden it seems the government have hit that big red button and said, winter restrictions, here we go again.
Yes, it's absolute panic again. I can understand where they're coming from because they want to prevent locking down for Christmas. But actually, by having this panic, they're indirectly causing a terrible chaos in the lead up to Christmas. I myself am aware of 3 things that have been cancelled because of this announcement, because just to be safe. So the knock-on effect on everything, the economy, is awful. As I was implying last week, I don't think this virus is going to be very, very bad with regards to hospitalisation and death. It is very, very infectious. There's no doubt about that. We have seen a lot of people going down with it, but it is mild. Interestingly, my colleagues, I've noticed, are going down with terrible colds and flus, and they're COVID negative, but they're very ill, having to go home to bed. But it's not COVID, and there's a risk of mistaking what is going on. And I really wanted to re-emphasise again is that what we're seeing is this highly infectious agent, which is not too bad. Locking down, working from home, not spreading it, what's it going to achieve? No, it's going to go through the population, and I think we've got no option but just to live with it and let it do that. Because if you've got 94.5%, I think it was the official figure with antibodies to the virus. Everybody's been exposed to it, and everybody who hasn't been exposed to it's had vaccines. So, you know, what is the issue? It shows a tremendous big message to me that they've got no faith in their own measures so far. And that sends out a terrible message to everybody else. I've met so many people now who said, oh, I've had enough of this. I would rather get infected and put up with it. You know, if it kills me, then it doesn't. The risks are very, very low. It's 0.085% is the latest figures we have from a Cambridge study. Just you have to put up with it, otherwise the lockdown will go on for good. And as I mentioned, we are already merging into this cold flu, which is making people far iller than normal. It might be because they were all protected rather well last year because of all the masks and the isolation, etc. So we're really going to have to learn to get on with the real world. And you know, the bottom line, as I say again and again, this virus is not Ebola. And the way of approaching it, and Chris Whitty's background is Ebola, and it does irritate me enormously how he presents the news and the latest variants. It's rather like they got some kind of addiction to making every bit of news potentially bad, a bad partner. We have to take some action. We need to take some action. So this is my take.
Now, one thing I can't really sort of put together about Omicron, because I think we've heard about Omicron now for a couple of weeks, maybe longer, and we've just been told we need to buy time to see what its impact is going to be. Surely if this was a really monstrous mutation that was going to, you know, strike people down and render them, you know, on ventilators, we'd know that by now, wouldn't we? It's in 36 countries around the world. I mean, is this lag time we've got to wait to see what happens? Is that really necessary, or is this just being over-precautious?
I think it's been over-precautious without a doubt. And as I said, we know it's too infectious to control. So we can't do anything. The only thing is you lock down everybody again. But that would not actually have any benefit because everyone's been exposed to it, going to be exposed to it. And I just think we have to be sensible. Those people who are very frightened that another flu virus, a COVID strain, would push them over the edge because they're very vulnerable, then they're the ones who basically got to be very cautious and look after themselves. For the rest of us, it makes no difference. I personally think it makes very little difference whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. You're still going to get infected with this virus, and we have seen that. There was a case of a dinner party where everybody had to be negative on the lateral flow before they went to the dinner party. They were all double vaccinated, and 14 of them go down 48 hours later with this new variant, which just proves you can take all the precautions and you'll still get infected. Fortunately, it was all mild. You know, the sort of thing I'd be very happy to put up with. In fact, I was reading an article on the way here that Vladimir Putin, who I didn't really think was that good a virologist or microbiologist.
Oh, he can do everything, according to Putin.
Yeah, and his Sputnik virus and everything. But what he actually said, this is actually, potentially from what I read, an airborne vaccine. And, you know, for once, it's not a stupid suggestion. It is. You know, everyone's going to get a mild version. Well, that is what vaccines are meant to be. They are meant to give you a mild version of the disease. So next time you see it, goodbye, you know.
Professor Dalgleish, always love talking to you, and thank you once again for coming into the studio. Right, time for a quick break. See you in a moment. watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. New Zealand is introducing radical new laws to stop young people from being allowed to buy cigarettes in a bid to make the whole country smoke-free by 2025. The ban will mean nobody under the age of 14 will ever be able to buy cigarettes in the country in their lifetimes. Under Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's rolling plan, the age limit for purchasing cigarettes will increase yearly until it's illegal for the entire population. Well, Mark Littlewood is the Director General at the Institute of Economic Affairs and a bit of an enthusiastic smoker. Mark, what do you make of this plan?
It's pretty crazy, in my view, Alex. You can see what they're getting at. They're trying to phase out cigarette smoking. They've had some success in New Zealand with young people switching to less harmful products, e-cigarettes, vaping, that kind of thing. But I think this plan is crazy. You know what? They've only been two countries in recent times, two areas of the world that have sought to ban cigarettes altogether. One was Islamic State and one was Bhutan. But in Bhutan, they had to actually recoil from that policy because tobacco smugglers were actually bringing COVID-19 into the country. So I'm not sure this will work. Because imagine we roll forward, let's say, 20 years. Tobacconists who are selling cigarettes will now have to ID check you for whether you are 35 or 34. Roll forward another 20 years. Are you 55 or 54? Those sort of ID checks are going to be extremely difficult. And of course, the secondary market will balloon, Alex. I mean, if you just know someone who's a few years older from you, you get them to procure the cigarettes for you and pass them on to you. It will be almost impossible for the state to stop that. And worst of all, of course, it's a recipe for smuggling. If you don't let the legitimate market provide cigarettes where you can properly regulate it, have age checks and all the rest, then gangsters and organised crime fill the void. That's a real problem. So I can see the thinking behind this, but I think they're far better to the most successful anti-cigarette policies have been about education and information, not about trying to strangle the legitimate side of the economy.
But is not bringing in some sort of legislation like this designed especially to stop young people from becoming smokers in the first place? Even though, as you said, I think it's a bit of a nonsense if someone else 2 years older can buy a packet of cigarettes and then lend you one. But you know, it does reaffirm a big public health message, doesn't it? It does go some way towards putting it back right to the front of public consciousness that smoking does kill.
You know what, Alex? I struggle to imagine anybody who doesn't know that now.
It's almost as if we're fighting a battle that was won many decades ago. It is true, if you go back to the 1950s and the 1960s, the cigarette companies were outrageous in what they said. Look at some of the advertising from the time, even suggestions that some sort of brands of cigarettes were good for your throat or whatever. Absolutely outrageous. And I think 30, 40, 50 years ago, you could have made a case that people did not know how bad smoking could be for you. It's a very dangerous habit to have. It can be a lethal habit to have. I think it's still, in the Western world at least, the single biggest cause of preventable death. But all of that is known. Why can't a consumer then make an informed choice? What I find particularly strange here, it's true in New Zealand, but generally true across the world as a whole. We seem to be forever tightening down on tobacco and cigarettes, but considering sort of being a bit more liberal about presently illegal drugs, cannabis, possibly other drugs as well. I think that you need an informed population. The job of the government and the public health authorities is to make sure that youngsters and indeed oldsters like me are aware of the damage that cigarette smoking can do them. But I think it's pretty much mission accomplished on that score. I don't know about you, Alex, but I don't think I've met anyone in decades who believes that smoking isn't bad for them. And once you've got to that situation, I think as a matter of principle, you should let individuals decide, and rolling this on and effectively having a generation or several generations who are allowed to smoke and then several generations who are not is a particularly cack-handed way of actually trying to get people onto safer products, in my view.
Yeah, no, it does seem a bit of a nutty approach to the whole thing. Mark Littlewood, love having you on, Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Well, let's talk honesty. It's difficult to take the blame, especially when your job depends on it. Yesterday, we saw the Prime Minister's former spokeswoman, Allegra Stratton, take one for the team after footage emerged of her joking about a Christmas party at a mock press conference days after the alleged event. But while she may have been right to resign over the tone her comments struck, she went home from the party when she wasn't even there. Well, let's remind ourselves of her misdemeanour. This is the footage that was leaked to ITV.
I've just seen reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home. Hold on.
Would the Prime Minister condone having a Christmas party?
What's the answer?
I don't know. It wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine.
Just be clear, it's not. Is cheese and wine all right? No. It was a business meeting.
I'm joking.
This is recorded. This fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
Well, so what's the impact when you have to take the fall? Let's talk to the psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. It's a big ask, isn't it, for one person to cop the blame on what seems to be a whole team of people conducting a series of indiscretions.
Yes, evolutionary biologists call this a classic case of altruism, and it's actually long puzzled people as to why altruistic behaviour exists in the animal kingdom, but it's partly to ensure the survival of everybody else, the perpetuation of the genes of everyone else who gets saved by your altruistic behaviour. So what can be of some comfort to someone in a particular situation is that they know they are doing it for the greater good, or that they know that they're doing it to ensure the survival of maybe a project or a group of people. I'm not entirely convinced that that actually holds water in this case.
Saw her resignation statement yesterday. I mean, she looked incredibly distressed. The poor woman was crying. And it strikes me, what about the rest of them in that room playing with that mock press conference? I mean, did she decide that that was going to be the question that was asked to her? I mean, she was put in a pretty difficult situation. Video was then leaked. I'd imagine she's feeling a bit of a burning sense of injustice.
She may well feel that she has been scapegoated for this, and people have been speaking today about maybe Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, who has also been filmed making light of the fact that the police might not be investigating a particular event, and people are drawing conclusions that maybe this is one rule for men and one rule for women. That's also being spoken of. But you're right, she looked absolutely distraught, and Obviously, emotions can be quite complicated things. It could be around sadness, but it could also be incredible fury that you have had to be the one to take the rap for something that was perhaps constructed by other people. But if you are the front person for something, then maybe that is part of your role. It is way more complicated than just saying she didn't go to the party, therefore maybe she shouldn't have had to have resigned.
And it's interesting you brought up the sort of charges of sexism that are being bandied about at the moment, because it does strike me that, as you said, Jacob Rees-Mogg, nothing's happened to him. There were, other people in that room who were male, and yet she is the one whose head has rolled. Is that the way these things tend to work? When it comes to the difference in psychology between men and women, do we often find that perhaps women are more willing to be altruistic?
No, there's no difference in the genders in terms of altruistic behaviour across the animal kingdom. In fact, it's more about what's going to be best for the survival of the rest of the tribe, and therefore everybody usually steps up to the plate. I also don't think it's necessarily about a particularly macho culture. There are accusations that Westminster, for example, might be particularly macho, but I don't really think that's the case here. It could simply be that in the pecking order, Jacob Rees-Mogg is a bigger beast. He is perhaps more valuable to Boris Johnson, and that in a situation where there is a video of somebody who is laughing at a particular situation, it's very easy to point to that person and say, well, you're on the front line, so you're the one that has to go. You've become the story, and therefore you need to go. But that's why I think this story will probably play out for a bit longer, because it actually speaks to a lot of things around injustice and unfairness, not just around the fact that a party was held when many more people were locked down, but just in terms of how it's been handled.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Lucy, we always love having you on. Lucy Beresford there, who is a psychotherapist and friend of the show. Well, today we've been asking if the UK is experiencing a pandemic of political hypocrisy. Well, let's hear what you, the viewers, have had to say. Earlier, we asked, is the UK experiencing lots of political lies? The results of our poll are in, and over 94% of you say yes, we are. Lots of you have been getting in touch this evening. No surprise there. This story really does have the nation chatting, doesn't it? One viewer says, the voters at the last general election were not blind to Boris's faults and are loyal to him. Glass houses and stones come to mind. Another adds, I can sum up hypocrisy with 3 names in this country: Boris, Rayner, Sturgeon. One viewer says, we're suffering both political and medical hypocrisy. There is no following the science, and if the opposition had any guts, which they don't, they would table a motion to relinquish the emergency powers now. We need 325 Tory MPs to grow a set and rebel for the sake of the people. You've been watching The Afternoon Agenda. I've had a jolly old time today. I hope you have too. I'm off on holiday next week. So that's it. You won't be seeing me for a little bit of time, but do stay tuned, because you will be seeing Michelle Dewberry up next, and you don't want to miss that. Bye-bye from me.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Good evening. Many of us having a fairly wet end to the day, but tomorrow a bright and breezy kind of day, but there will be showers, particularly in the west, and a pretty cold feel as well with that breeze picking up. At the moment we've got low pressure to the northwest, but this weather front is slicing its way across the country, bringing outbreaks of rain and particularly some heavy bursts across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast in the next few hours. It does all tend to scoot out into the North Sea through the early hours, so things becoming drier in the east. But further west there will be showers, those showers of snow over the Scottish mountains, but at low levels hail is likely and the showers could be pretty lively. As the wet weather clears away and skies stay clear across Scotland for longest, there could be a touch of frost here, which might mean it's a little icy first thing on Friday.